Okay, so I'm going to be going through the latest question on the ACCA CBE site, the platform, and it's from March, June 2024. And there's two questions here for section C. The first question is VenHosp, and this is all about regression analysis. So I will be going through how to do this question because I think it's a bit of a horror for everybody because nobody had seen a question on regression analysis before because it was new to the syllabus and they tended to just test it in the MCQ sections, but now they've done a question in section C. So there's quite a lot of narrative, as you can see, and we've got part A and we've got part B, which is more of a written section. So I'm going to go through systematically this and hopefully you can follow. So it says use least squares regression based on the quarterly data for the 20XT2 to XT5 to calculate VenHosp's expected staff days in Q4 20XT6. Round your answer to the nearest full day. So there's the instructions, and that's for 5 marks. So that's part one. So what we've got down here, it says the data which the CE wants you to use for the least squares regression calculation is for requirement A1. Okay, so you've got that one. So let's go through and work out what's going on. It's an agency which supplies temporary staff, providing catering and hospitality services for events at stadium venues in D-Land. Demand for VenHosp staff depends on the number of events taking place and whether a venue selects VenHosp to supply staff for its events. As such, there's a strong correlation between the total number of events taking place in the period and the number of staff supplied by VenHosp. There is an intense competition between temporary staffing agencies. All the agencies charge similar rates for the staff they provide, and there's little scope for the agency to increase that price. So the average charge out rate is $16 an hour. So that is the revenue, $16 an hour. They then pay the staff $11.25 an hour on an average. And on average, they work 8 hours per event day. So you're charging out 16 for 8 hours a day, and you're paying the staff. So that's your profit, your gross profit, the difference between those two. They're only paid for the hours they work. But by law, staffing agencies in D-Land also have to make additional contributions directly to the government at a rate of 10% on the amounts they pay to the staff. Okay, so that further reduces the profit margin. We've given some information about the legal minimum wage, but it's been increased to 11 from 10.50. And there's been a shortage of workers prepared to work as temporary staff in catering and hospitality services because the work is seen as physically demanding and relatively poorly paid. Then we've got some information from the HR director suggested that the amount Venlock pays its staff should be increased, and the chief executive officer imposes the increase, saying it will reduce profits. But the HR director has argued that decisions about pay rates need to take account of ethical issues, not just short-term financial ones. So this kind of narrative is all going to be used when you're doing the written section. We need to get to the first bit, which is what information do we need to do this regression analysis. So Venrock now produces quarterly forecasts for expected revenues and staff costs. These have already been produced for quarters 1 to 3, but not yet for quarter 4. So the total number of stadium events in quarter 4 is 114. The CEO has asked you to prepare the forecast for quarter 4 using the least squares regression forecast. And the demand for staff days is expected in the quarter and based on the current rates of pay. So note a staff day constitutes one member of temporary staff being provided to a client for 1 day. So what we're going to do is create a regression equation which predicts the number of staff days that's going to be required for the number of events going on in the stadium. And so if you call up your sheet, your exam formula sheet, if you haven't practiced this, hoping that you can work this one out, So this is regression analysis. We've got to produce a relationship between y equals a plus bx. Now, x is the number of stadium events. Y then becomes the number of days that are needed for staffing days. And they've already given you the parameters, shall we say, or the variables, sum of x, sum of y, sum of x squared, sum of y squared, and sum of x times y, to be able to put into these formulas and to get out that relationship. So what you need to do is you need to first of all start with B, because B is in A, and then calculate A. And then you'll find that you've got an equation. You've got a figure for A, which is the intercept of the y-axis, and then you've got a figure for B, which is the gradient of the line. This produces a linear relationship between X, which is the 114, the number of events scheduled, and Y is the number of staffing days. So you need to now get the figures into this spreadsheet to be able to use it properly. Now, the quickest way of doing it, I think, is to try and copy and paste. So I'm doing Control C, and then I'm going to put it here and go Control View. And therefore, it's put those figures in there for me, and I can use those in my formulas. There's no point in rewriting out all the formulas. They're there. You won't get any marks for writing out the formulas. You just get marks for using them. But you do need to name the variables. So I can't find that sum sign. So I just go sum x. So sx is that one. That's going to be sy. That's going to be sum x squared. Just going to put it in that like that. That's going to be sum y squared. And that one's going to be sum x times y. So hopefully that'll help when we're using it. So first of all, you need to find B. And so the way of finding B, you can see you've got something on the top and something on the bottom. So work out the top first, and then work out the bottom, and then divide one into the other. So you simply now just follow the formula. Oh, I need to also talk to you about the fact that you need an N. So N is the number of samples that they used. And they're saying this is based on a sample size N of 16. So it is there for you, so you can see it. So N is 16. So to find B now, we just go equals, following the formula, 16 times by sum of x, y, then minus, and this works in terms of order of operations. You don't need brackets, but if you want brackets, you can, but you don't need it because the order of operations work. Sum of x times sum of y. And then always pull it out so you can see what's there. So that's that figure now for the top. The bottom is going to be n times sum of x squared minus x, then it's squared. So I would do it like that. It's a little hat to the 2. And again, the order of operations works because they're going to be timesing the first 2 and then taking off b to the power of 2. So that should work. So therefore now you find b, and b is therefore, so little b I'll do, therefore equal to that divided by that. Make it as small as possible just because it looks better. So, seeing a nice big long line doesn't really help. And you're going to be getting marks for finding B because this is why it's being built up with 5 marks, all right? So now we're going to find A. So again, we're going to use the formulas. So A is the sum of y divided by n minus B, which is that figure, B times the sum of x divided by n. And that equals minus 7 to 1.15. Now y is putting that together. So y is therefore So then we find y. So y is going to be, don't forget, x is 114. So you might want to define x as well. 114. So y is now going to be equals that plus b times x. And so they've asked you to round your answers to the nearest full day. So you might as well just do the rounding here. So it does it for you. And therefore the answer is days, nearest full days. Highlight it so that they know that's your answer. And then you've done part A1. So you must label that you've done part A1. So y is the number of days. So that's my answer. So that's part 1 done. Is there any questions on that? Okay. We'll close this down now for a minute. So the next part is then assume your answer to A1 gave you a figure of 30,000. They've done this so you can actually do these things independently, by the way. So it's easier for them to give you an assumption. So it means that if you couldn't do part A1, then you could do part 2. All right. So now we're assuming that this y is equal to 30,000. Based on this figure, calculate the forecast revenue, staff costs, and gross profit, less staff costs for quarter 4. So we're now going to do that. So that's going to be number 2. So we're now assuming that days are going to be 30,000. So we just need to produce a normal, easy budget. It's nothing harder than that. We need to know what revenue is, what your staff costs are, and don't forget, if I spell things wrong, I don't care, and what my government levy is. Let's put government levy. And so we need to find a price, and we need to find, remember that it's going to be, those are the number of days. So we charge by the hour. So 16 is the price. 8 hours. And therefore the revenue is going to be 30,000 times by 16 times by 8 hours. I always like to put that again like that so it's easy to see. So that's in dollars. So that is the hours and that's the rate. So the staff costs, currently the rate is 11.25. Again, just so you see where the price was there, that was 16. And then they told us that they work an 8-hour day. Just so you knew, that's where those come. And then we've got this 10% levy as well. So the staff cost is a rate of 8, not at 8, 11.25. Again, it's 8 hours. So it's 11 times 30 times by the 8. So they can see how you've built that up. I'm going to put that in like that. And then the levy is just basically 10% of that. And you can do it like that, 10% of that. So therefore the gross profit, which is what they've asked you for, is going to be that minus that minus that, 870. And so make sure you highlight your gross profit. And so they wanted forecast revenue, staff costs, and gross profit. So we've got them all there so that they can see that. I might just do that. Those are the figures they want. So hopefully that's the answer now to 4 marks. Number 3 is now calculating the correlation coefficient R between the total number of events in DLAND and VenLop staff days based on the quarterly data for 20XT2 to XT5. So we're now going to find out the correlation. And so again, we've just need to find R equals. Now, R, again, is on your formula sheet. And this is the sum. You've got one on the top, one on the bottom, numerator and denominator. And therefore, again, just do it in stages. Do the top first and then the bottom second, and then divide. So now that top is very similar to something else. It's this top. Can you see? That is the same as B. We've already done that already. So don't repeat it. Just go up and take the top of B because you've already done it. All right. So that's easy. We've now just got to do the bottom. I might put that over there actually. So we might just have to do the bottom now. And the bottom is got to be square rooted. So I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to do that in a minute. So I would now just do open brackets because then you can get the times in. So it's n 16 times by sum of x squared minus x squared, sum of x squared. That's closed brackets. And then we times by n again times by sum of y squared minus y, sum of y to squared. Oh, no, not doing it again. 2. No, I haven't put the brackets in, so I'm going to make sure I put the brackets in. And then I've now got that on the bottom. And so that needs to be square rooted. So therefore, R is now going to be that divided by that little hat, and I would do it to the 0.5 to square root it because it's just the easiest way of doing it. And then you get that figure of 0.80. So make it round it down so that we got as little as possible. And so the answer is therefore, and all your workings are here so they can see how you've done it and follow it all through. So let's go to the written section, which I've pre-prepared. So the first one says, briefly discuss the limitations of regression analysis. So it's 3 marks. So it's one sentence, one explained sentence for each of the limitations. Now, you only needed 3, but they've put 4 here. Okay. So the main one is it assumes a linear relationship, and in reality, they may not be linear. Regression analysis and correlation can suggest a relationship exists between 2 variables, but it may not just be that it's influenced by those 2 variables. It may just be from other factors. Extrapolation, regression analysis uses past observations to predict what's going to happen in future. And we all know that the past is not necessarily a good predictor of the future. And then we've got these outliers. Regression analysis could be distorted by outliers, which can make the regression line less accurate. I think the first 3 are the most valid. That's just another one. Don't waste time doing 4, only do 3 because it's only the first 3 that get marked. Then it says discuss 3 factors the board should consider when deciding whether to increase the hourly wage from $11.25 to $11.75. So that's where you now use the scenario. So the chief exec is opposing increasing the price, right? So that must be a financial issue, okay? They're talking about shortage of workers and the minimum wage. So they should be thinking about, are we being ethical to our staff? Yeah. They're talking about it being competitive to get staff. So are we going to be able to keep our staff if we keep our prices or our rates at 11.25? So those are the sorts of factors. And so discuss 3 factors. So therefore it's 2 for each factor. So do not you know, because they've said 3 factors, come up with 5 or 6, thinking that you'll get six factors will get you 6 marks. They're only going to mark the first 3. And so what you obviously need to do is describe the factor and then add some more value to it. All right. So financially, the first one, you've got to think to yourself, well, what is going to be the financial effect? They're going to put the price up to 11.75 from 11.25. So you just get your calculator out and you remember that you were using 30,000 before. So what's going to happen if you're now paying people an extra 50 cents? So you can basically calculate that reduction in profit will be 120, which is basically, just so you know where it comes from, the extra rate is 50 cents. Yeah. You times that by 30,000 and you times that by 8 hours. And so that's where that 120's gone. So that will reduce gross profit by that. And you can work out a percentage of it. It means it's going to be a large reduction in profits of 15%, which is 120 over the original profit. So then I would have talked about the minimum wage. The minimum wage is currently 11 is 11 because it's been put up and we're only just above it. Therefore, from an ethical perspective, there could be questions about whether they're paying the staff fairly. You didn't actually need to do this other sentence. That would have given you 2 marks. But the minimum wage could suggest that living costs are rising. So that's just, so the 2 marks would have been for this bit. And then we talked about competitors. So obviously you've got to compare your pay rates to similar to your competitors. As there's a shortage of staff, then you'll be unable to attract staff, and this will limit their ability to provide services to clients. So again, just 1 and 2, this is extra if they want to. Yeah, you don't. So you've got to make sure that you write 2 points that are adding value to your factors that you've come up with. Okay. So hopefully a much more doable question now, if you see this again. And I'm hoping that when they do publish these sorts of questions, which are new syllabus areas, that this is how they would test it again next time they do it, which is helpful. All right. So hopefully you're all happy.